Chapter 1. The Worst Birthday. The chapter opens on a tense breakfast scene at number 4, Privet Drive, where an argument has erupted. The source of the conflict is the loud, nocturnal hooting of Harry Potter's owl, Hedwig, which has repeatedly disturbed his uncle, Vernon Dursley. Mr. Dursley, infuriated, threatens to get rid of the owl. Harry attempts to explain that Hedwig is simply bored and needs to be let out to fly. But his uncle, a large man with a thick moustache, dismisses this with suspicion, believing Harry has ulterior motives. The conversation is interrupted by the Dursleys' massive son Dudley, who demands more bacon. This shifts the focus to Aunt Petunia doting on her son, concerned about the quality of his school food, a sentiment her husband heartily dismisses. The situation escalates dramatically when Harry, annoyed by Dudley's rudeness, tells him he has forgotten the magic word. The mere mention of a word associated with his wizardry sends the Dursley family into a state of panic and rage. Dudley falls from his chair in shock, Mrs. Dursley screams, and Mr. Dursley becomes purple-faced with fury, pounding the table and accusing Harry of threatening his cousin. Despite Harry's quick clarification that he only meant the word please, his uncle furiously reminds him that any mention of his abnormality is forbidden in their house. Following this confrontation, the narrative delves into Harry's profound unhappiness and isolation during the summer holiday. He desperately misses Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, a feeling he likens to a constant stomachache. His spellbooks, wand, and prized Nimbus 2000 broomstick have all been locked away by Uncle Vernon, preventing him from practicing Quidditch or completing his homework. The Dursleys, being muggles with no magical ability, view his wizarding nature as a source of deep shame. To further cut him off from his world, they have even padlocked Hedwig in her cage. The chapter also provides a brief history of Harry's past. The lightning bolt scar on his forehead is the only physical remnant of the attack by the dark sorcerer Lord Voldemort, who killed his parents but was mysteriously vanquished when he failed to kill the infant Harry. This event led to Harry being raised by his aunt and uncle, who concealed his magical heritage for a decade. The Dursleys have completely forgotten that this day is, in fact, Harry's 12th birthday. Instead of acknowledging Harry's birthday, Uncle Vernon announces that the day is important for another reason. A dinner party he is hosting for a wealthy builder, Mr. Mason, and his wife, from whom he hopes to secure a massive business deal for his drill manufacturing company. The family meticulously rehearses their roles for the evening. Petunia will greet the guests, Dudley will politely take their coats, and both are prepared with fawning compliments. Harry's role, as dictated by his uncle, is to remain in his bedroom, make absolutely no noise, and pretend he does not exist. The Masons are to be kept completely unaware of his presence, and Vernon hopes to have the business deal finalized by the end of the night. After the rehearsal, Harry is sent out of the house to do chores while his aunt cleans. He sits in the garden, feeling utterly alone and miserable, especially as he has not received any letters from his best friends, Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger, all summer. While lost in these thoughts, he briefly sees a pair of enormous green eyes staring at him from inside the hedge before they vanish. Dudley then comes outside to taunt Harry about his lack of birthday cards and friends. Goaded by his cousin, Harry retaliates by pretending he is considering which spell to use to set the hedge on fire. He mutters nonsensical words, which sends the terrified Dudley running back into the house, screaming for his mother. Although no real magic was performed, Aunt Petunia punishes Harry severely for the stunt, assigning him a full day of exhausting yard work in the blazing sun. By the time he is finally called inside, it is evening and the guests are about to arrive. He is given a pitiful meal of 2 slices of bread and some cheese before being ordered upstairs. As he reaches the top of the stairs, the doorbell rings, and Uncle Vernon gives him one last threatening reminder to remain completely silent. Harry enters his bedroom, intending to collapse onto his bed, only to find that a strange creature is already sitting on it. Chapter 2. Dobby's Warning. The narrative commences with Harry Potter discovering a peculiar small creature in his bedroom. This being possesses large bat-like ears and protruding green eyes comparable in size to tennis balls. Harry immediately recognizes it as the same creature he had spotted observing him from the garden hedge earlier that day. As the two stare at one another, the sounds of his uncle and aunt welcoming the Mason family drift up from downstairs. The creature, clad in what appears to be a dirty old pillowcase with holes for its limbs, performs a deep bow and introduces itself in a high-pitched voice as Dobby, a house elf. Harry, concerned about the noise and the inopportune timing of the visit, attempts to be polite but firm, explaining that it is not a good moment for a house elf to be in his room. Dobby becomes intensely emotional, bursting into loud sobs when Harry offers him a seat, wailing that no wizard has ever treated him as an equal. This display of emotion forces Harry to quiet the elf to avoid alerting the Dursleys. Dobby then reveals his purpose. He has come to warn Harry Potter. However, before he can elaborate, he instinctively punishes himself for nearly speaking ill of his masters by banging his head against the window. He explains that he is bound to serve a single wizarding family forever and would face severe punishment if they knew he was here. Dobby's life of perpetual, often self-inflicted punishment for minor transgressions horrifies Harry, who begins to see his own difficult life with the Dursleys in a new, less severe light. The house elf explains that he has come to prevent Harry from returning to Hogwarts because a terrible plot is set to unfold there, one that will place Harry in mortal danger. When pressed for details, Dobby refuses to speak further, but through a series of gestures, he indicates that the plot is not orchestrated by Lord Voldemort. The conversation is interrupted when Dobby, in another fit of self-punishment for revealing too much, begins loudly beating himself with Harry's desk lamp. This noise alerts Uncle Vernon, who storms upstairs and delivers a furious threat to Harry before returning to his guests. Dobby then slyly reveals that he has been intercepting all of Harry's friends' letters, hoping that if Harry believed his friends had forgotten him, he would not wish to return to school. Enraged, Harry demands his mail, but Dobby refuses unless Harry promises to stay away from Hogwarts. When Harry refuses, Dobby sprints downstairs. Harry pursues him, only to find Dobby levitating Aunt Petunia's elaborate pudding in the kitchen. The house elf gives Harry one last chance to comply, and upon his final refusal, Dobby lets the pudding crash to the floor, creating an enormous mess. Dobby then vanishes with a crack. The catastrophic event ruins the Dursleys' dinner party. Uncle Vernon's attempt to salvage the evening is completely destroyed when an owl from the Ministry of Magic swoops in and delivers a letter to Mrs. Mason's head, causing the guests to flee in terror. The letter is an official warning to Harry for the unauthorized use of a hover charm, revealing to a furious Uncle Vernon that Harry is not permitted to use magic outside of school. Seizing this new knowledge as a weapon, Uncle Vernon locks Harry in his room, installs bars on his window, and begins passing meagre meals through a newly fitted cat flap, ensuring Harry can never return to his school. After 3 days of imprisonment and near starvation, a despairing Harry falls into a troubled sleep, only to be awakened by a noise at his window. He looks up to see the freckled, red-haired face of his best friend, Ron Weasley, staring in at him from the other side of the bars. Chapter 3. The Burrow. The chapter commences with Harry Potter, confined to his room at the Dursleys, being startled by the appearance of his best friend, Ron Weasley, outside his barred window. Harry's astonishment quickly turns to disbelief as he realizes Ron is leaning out of an old, flying turquoise car, suspended in mid-air. In the front seats are Ron's older twin brothers, Fred and George, who greet Harry cheerfully. Ron immediately questions Harry about his silence, explaining he had sent numerous letters and that his father, who works at the Ministry of Magic, had reported Harry receiving an official warning for using underage magic in front of muggles. Harry tries to explain it was not his doing, but Ron, despite the hypocrisy of their current magical transportation, explains that their borrowed, enchanted car does not count in the same way. Recognizing the urgency, Harry starts to despair, explaining his imprisonment and inability to use magic to free himself. Ron, however, reassures him that they have come to rescue him and that magic will not be necessary. Following Fred's instruction, Harry ties a rope, thrown from the car, around the window bars. With a loud revving of the engine, Fred pilots the car upwards, cleanly yanking the bars from the window frame. Ron hauls the heavy bars into the back seat, while Harry listens anxiously for any sign of the Dursleys waking. The twins then climb into Harry's room to address the problem of his locked school trunk. Demonstrating a skill Fred notes many wizards dismiss, George deftly picks the lock on Harry's bedroom door with a simple hairpin. The brothers work together to quietly move Harry's heavy trunk from the cupboard under the stairs up to his room. As they painstakingly push the trunk through the window into the car, a sudden screech from Hedwig, Harry's owl, alerts Uncle Vernon. Just as Harry is climbing out, his uncle bursts in, bellowing, and grabs him by the ankle. A frantic tug-of-war ensues, with the Weasley brothers pulling Harry's arms and Uncle Vernon pulling his leg. The Weasleys ultimately prevail, pulling Harry fully into the car. They speed away into the night, leaving the Dursleys staring in shock from the window. During the flight, Harry recounts the entire story of Dobby the house elf, his dire warnings, and the disastrous pudding incident. The Weasley twins find the story highly suspicious, suggesting that a house elf would need their master's permission for such an act, and that it was likely a prank orchestrated by someone with a grudge. They all quickly agree on the most probable suspect, Draco Malfoy. George confirms that Draco's father, Lucius Malfoy, was a known and influential supporter of Lord Voldemort, who claimed coercion after the Dark Wizard's fall. The conversation solidifies the idea that the Malfoys, being a wealthy old wizarding family, would indeed own a house elf, and that sending him to interfere with Harry is precisely the sort of malicious act they would commit. As they fly towards the Weasley home, known as the Burrow, they discuss Mr. Weasley's job in the misuse of Muggle artifacts office, and his obsessive, albeit illegal, fascination with enchanting Muggle objects in his shed, a source of constant frustration for his wife. Upon landing in the pre-dawn light, Harry gets his first look at the chaotic, crooked, and wonderful-looking house. Their plan to sneak inside undetected is immediately thwarted by the appearance of Mrs. Weasley, who is marching towards them like a saber-toothed tiger. She unleashes a furious tirade upon her sons for their reckless behavior, but, in a sudden shift of tone, greets Harry with warmth and affection, inviting him in for breakfast. Inside the cramped, magical kitchen, Mrs. Weasley continues to scold her sons, while piling Harry's plate with a massive breakfast. After a brief, shy appearance by Ginny, the youngest Weasley, the boys are sentenced to de-gnome the garden as punishment. Harry, eager to experience more of wizarding life, volunteers to help. The task involves swinging the small, leathery gnomes in circles to make them dizzy before flinging them out of the garden. The work is interrupted by the arrival of Mr. Weasley, who returns exhausted from a night of raids. His wife promptly confronts him about the illegally enchanted car, revealing that she knows he wrote the legal loophole that allows him to tinker with Muggle items. As the argument escalates, Ron leads Harry upstairs to the safety of his bedroom. The room is small and covered in bright orange posters of the Chudley Cannons Quidditch team. Despite its humble state, Harry, overwhelmed with gratitude, declares it the best house he has ever been in, causing Ron's ears to turn pink with pleasure. Chapter 4. At Flourish and Blots. Life at the Weasley household, known as the Burrow, presented a stark and chaotic contrast to Harry's upbringing at Privet Drive. Where the Dursleys enforced rigid order, the Weasleys' home was a place of vibrant, magical unpredictability. Harry was initially startled by household items with personalities, such as a mirror over the kitchen mantelpiece that would vocally critique his appearance, shouting at him to tuck in his shirt. The family was also accustomed to the resident ghoul in the attic, who would protest quiet moments by howling and banging pipes, and they considered the frequent small explosions emanating from Fred and George's bedroom to be entirely normal. However, the most profound difference for Harry was not the magical chaos, but the simple fact that he was surrounded by people who seemed to genuinely like him. Mrs. Weasley constantly fussed over him, ensuring he was well fed to the point of offering 4th helpings at meals, while Mr. Weasley was endlessly fascinated by Harry's knowledge of the Muggle world. He would seat Harry beside him at dinner to pepper him with questions about non-magical inventions and systems like plugs, the postal service, and telephones, which he found ingenious. One morning, the official letters from Hogwarts arrived, As Harry and Ron entered the kitchen, Ginny, the youngest Weasley, became so flustered by Harry's presence that she clumsily knocked her porridge bowl to the floor. This was a common reaction for her. She often dropped things whenever Harry was near. When she emerged from under the table, her face was bright red. The letters confirmed their return to Hogwarts and included the required book lists for the upcoming year. It was quickly noted that the entire list for second-year students consisted of books written by a single author, Gilderoy Lockhart. Fred joked that the new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher must be a female admirer of Lockhart's. The sheer number of expensive new books raised financial concerns, which Mrs. Weasley tried to downplay, though her worried expression betrayed her anxiety. Just then, the family's ancient owl, Errol, made a clumsy arrival, delivering a letter from Hermione. She expressed her relief that Harry was safe and proposed they all meet in Diagon Alley to buy their school supplies. Later, while practicing Quidditch in a secluded paddock, using apples as stand-ins for quaffles, the Weasley brothers discussed their older brother Percy's recent achievement of 12 ordinary wizarding levels, and George again voiced his concern about how their parents would afford all the new school supplies. The conversation made Harry feel awkward, acutely aware of the small fortune his parents had left him in his Gringotts vault. On the day of their trip to London, Harry was introduced to a new form of magical transportation, flue powder. After receiving a whirlwind of confusing and contradictory instructions from the family, Harry took a pinch of the glittering powder, stepped into the fireplace, and attempted to shout, "Diagon Alley." However, he inhaled hot ash and choked on the words, causing his journey to go awry. Instead of arriving in the bright, bustling Diagon Alley, Harry tumbled out of a fireplace into a large, dimly lit shop filled with sinister and dark artifacts, including a withered hand, blood-stained cards, and human bones. Realizing his mistake, he tried to leave, only to see Draco Malfoy and his father Lucius approaching the shop. Harry quickly hid inside a large cabinet and overheard their conversation with the shop's proprietor, Mr. Borgin. Lucius Malfoy was there to sell several dark items from his collection, expressing concern about potential Ministry of Magic raids that he resentfully blamed on Arthur Weasley. Lucius also spoke cruelly to his son, admonishing him for being outperformed in his studies by Hermione Granger, a witch from a non-wizarding family. After the Malfoys left, Harry slipped out of the shop and found himself in a dark and grimy street called Nocturne Alley. He was almost immediately rescued by the towering figure of Hagrid, who was there to purchase flesh-eating slug repellent for the school's cabbages. Hagrid briskly steered a soot-covered Harry back to Diagon Alley, where they were joyfully reunited with Hermione and, shortly after, the rest of the Weasleys. At Gringotts Bank, the disparity between the Weasleys' finances and Harry's wealth was uncomfortably clear when Mrs. Weasley collected a very small number of coins from their vault, while Harry filled a large bag from his. The group later converged at the Flourish and Blot's bookshop, which was mobbed by a crowd eager for a book signing with the famous Gilderoy Lockhart. Lockhart, a vain wizard in forget-me-not blue robes, spotted Harry and seized the opportunity for publicity. He pulled Harry to the front for photographs, loudly announced that he would be the new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher at Hogwarts, and gifted Harry his entire published works. This encounter was immediately followed by a confrontation with Draco Malfoy, who mocked Harry's fame. Ginny, in a rare moment of confidence, spoke up to defend Harry. The tension escalated dramatically with the arrival of Lucius Malfoy, who insulted the Weasleys' poverty and their association with the Grangers. His sneering remarks prompted Mr. Weasley to lunge at him, starting a brawl that sent books flying and the crowd scattering. Hagrid intervened to separate the two men. Before departing, a malevolent Lucius shoved an old, battered Transfiguration book back into Ginny's cauldron. The subdued group then returned to the leaky cauldron to travel back to the burrow, with Harry preparing for another, more careful attempt at using the flue network. Chapter 5. The Whomping Willow. The conclusion of the summer holidays arrived much too soon for Harry, who, despite looking forward to returning to Hogwarts, found himself reluctant to leave the burrow. His month with the Weasleys had been the most joyous period of his life, sparking a sense of envy for Ron's family life, when he contrasted it with the cold reception he anticipated from the Dursleys. Their final evening was marked by a magnificent feast prepared by Mrs. Weasley, culminating in a spectacular, albeit chaotic, indoor fireworks display by Fred and George. The next morning was a whirlwind of frantic activity, with Mrs. Weasley rushing about, family members colliding on the stairs, and Mr. Weasley having a near-disastrous trip over a chicken. The family's journey to the train station was to be made in a small Ford Anglia, and Harry was initially baffled as to how 8 people and all their luggage would fit. He soon discovered the car had been magically altered by Mr. Weasley, featuring a miraculously expanded boot and a stretched interior that comfortably accommodated everyone. The trip itself was fraught with delays. George forgot his fireworks, Fred left his broomstick behind, and Ginny realized she had forgotten her diary, making them dangerously late for their train. Mr. Weasley was tempted to use the car's invisibility booster to fly them to the station, but Mrs. Weasley strictly forbade it in broad daylight. They arrived at King's Cross Station with only a quarter of an hour to spare. The challenge was to access platform 9 and 3/4 by passing through the solid barrier between platforms 9 and 10. With only minutes remaining, the Weasleys began to go through in groups. Percy went first, followed by Mr. Weasley, then Fred and George. Mrs. Weasley took Ginny, instructing Harry and Ron to follow immediately after. With only a minute left, the 2 boys charged at the barrier together, fully expecting to pass through. Instead, they collided with it in a tremendous crash. Their trolleys bounced back, scattering their belongings and earning them stares from Muggles and a reprimand from a guard. Hedwig's cage tumbled to the floor, and the owl shrieked indignantly. In a state of growing panic, they realized the gateway had sealed itself, and the Hogwarts Express departed without them. Stranded and without Muggle money, a sudden and risky idea dawned on Ron. They could fly the car to Hogwarts. Justifying their plan under a clause for emergency use of underage magic, their panic morphed into a thrill of excitement. After retrieving the car, Ron and Harry loaded their trunks and took to the sky, activating the invisibility booster. The device proved faulty, causing the car to flicker in and out of sight as they ascended over London. They climbed above the clouds into a brilliant, sunlit world, following the path of the train far below them. The initial exhilaration of their adventure, sustained by a pack of toffees, eventually wore off over the long hours. The sun began to set, and the car's engine started to whine and falter, a sound they both tried to ignore. As darkness enveloped them and stars appeared, the engine's groans grew louder, and the windscreen wipers began to move feebly. Just as they finally spotted the turrets of Hogwarts Castle in the distance, the engine died completely. The car plummeted towards the ground in a terrifying, silent descent. Ron narrowly managed to swerve away from the castle wall, sending them soaring over the greenhouses and lawns before they crashed with an ear-splitting crunch into a massive ancient tree. The impact left Harry with a lump on his head and Ron with a snapped wand. Before they could fully assess the damage, the tree itself began to retaliate. With the force of a charging bull, its thick, gnarled branches pummeled the car from every side, denting the doors, cracking the windscreen, and caving in the roof. Trapped and under relentless assault, they were saved when the car's engine miraculously roared back to life. It shot backwards, escaping the tree's furious lashing. Once clear, the battered vehicle ejected both Harry and Ron, along with their luggage and Hedwig, before rumbling off into the darkness on its own accord. Stiff and bruised, they dragged their trunks toward the castle, their grand arrival turning into a miserable trek. Peeking through a window, they saw the sorting ceremony was underway, and noticed an empty seat at the staff table, where Professor Snape should have been. Their speculation about his absence was cut short by a cold voice behind them. It was Snape himself, his expression making it clear they were in profound trouble. He led them down to his gloomy dungeon office and confronted them with a copy of the Evening Prophet, which featured a story about a flying car being spotted by multiple Muggles. Snape relished their predicament, particularly the trouble it would cause for Ron's father, and pointed out the significant damage they had caused to the valuable Whomping Willow. Snape summoned Professor McGonagall and Professor Dumbledore. McGonagall was angrier than Harry had ever seen her, while Dumbledore's quiet disappointment was even more unsettling. After Harry recounted their story, Dumbledore decided against expelling them, but delivered a stern warning that another such incident would result in their removal from the school. He left their punishment to Professor McGonagall, who, to their immense relief, assigned them detention, but did not deduct any house points from Gryffindor. She then magically provided them with a large plate of sandwiches before leaving for the feast. After eating, they made their way to Gryffindor Tower, where Hermione met them, full of worry and disapproval. However, inside the common room, they were greeted not with scorn, but with a storm of applause. The entire house, including Fred and George, celebrated their spectacular and rule-breaking entrance. Amid the cheers, they escaped a furious-looking Percy and retreated to their dormitory, where their roommates also praised their unbelievable adventure, leaving Harry to grin in guilty enjoyment. Chapter 6. Gilderoy Lockhart. The following morning at breakfast, the mood soured quickly for Harry and Ron. In the great hall, under a grey, enchanted ceiling, Hermione offered them a stiff greeting, still evidently disapproving of their dramatic arrival. The Morning Post arrived in a flurry of owls, and the Weasleys' beleaguered owl, Errol, crash-landed in Hermione's milk jug, carrying a damp red envelope. Ron's face went pale with dread, recognizing it as a howler. Neville Longbottom, also present, urged Ron to open it immediately, warning that ignoring one makes the consequences far worse. Ron reluctantly opened the letter, and an amplified roar of Mrs. Weasley's voice filled the entire hall, causing plates to rattle. She furiously berated him for stealing the car, expressing her shock and fear, and revealing that Mr. Weasley was now facing an inquiry at the Ministry of Magic entirely because of their actions. After shouting that both he and Harry could have died, the voice fell silent, and the scarlet envelope burst into flames, leaving Ron deeply humiliated and Harry burning with guilt over the trouble he had caused Mr. Weasley. Their first class was double herbology in Greenhouse 3, a place they had never been, which housed more dangerous plants. Professor Sprout arrived with Gilderoy Lockhart, who was insufferably cheerful, taking credit for showing her how to mend the Whomping Willow. Before Harry could enter the greenhouse, Lockhart pulled him aside for a private chat. To Harry's complete bewilderment, Lockhart asserted that he understood perfectly why Harry had flown the car to school. It was a desperate attempt to regain the publicity he had tasted after appearing on the front page of the newspaper with him. He condescendingly advised Harry to calm down, stating that while having a famous scar was a start, it was nothing compared to winning Witch Weekly's Most Charming Smile Award 5 times. Inside, the lesson involved repotting infant mandrakes, dangerous magical plants whose cries, even as seedlings, could knock a person unconscious. After donning earmuffs, they witnessed Professor Sprout pull a plant that resembled a small, extremely ugly and screaming baby from the earth. They were joined by a Hufflepuff boy, Justin Finch Fletchley, an enthusiastic admirer of Lockhart. Later, in a difficult transfiguration class, Ron's broken wand proved to be a liability, backfiring with puffs of foul-smelling smoke and failing to perform the magic correctly. His mood did not improve at lunch when Hermione showed off the perfect buttons she had created, while he had only managed to squash his beetle. The afternoon brought their first Defense Against the Dark Arts lesson with Lockhart. In the courtyard beforehand, a small, mousy-haired first year named Colin Creevey excitedly approached Harry, asking for a photograph to prove he had met the famous Harry Potter. Their interaction was interrupted by Draco Malfoy, who loudly mocked Harry for giving out signed photos and cruelly taunted Ron about the howler his mother had sent. Just as Ron drew his faulty wand, Lockhart arrived, misreading the situation entirely. He slung an arm around Harry's shoulders, cheerfully agreed to a double portrait for Colin, and then dragged a mortified Harry away, lecturing him on the dangers of appearing big-headed so early in his career. Inside the classroom, Lockhart began his lesson not with practical defense, but with a quiz entirely about himself, testing their knowledge of his favorite color and secret ambitions. Hermione, having read all his books, earned a perfect score, to Ron's utter disbelief. Lockhart then unveiled what he claimed was a perilous lesson: a cage of freshly caught Cornish pixies. When Seamus Finnegan laughed at the idea of them being dangerous, Lockhart foolishly released the entire cage. Pandemonium immediately erupted. The electric blue creatures wrecked the classroom, lifted Neville by his ears to the ceiling chandelier, and showered students with ink and broken glass. Lockhart's attempt to control them with a nonsensical spell failed completely, and one of the pixies stole his wand. He then cowardly dove for cover under his own desk. When the bell rang, he fled the room, instructing Harry, Ron and Hermione to handle the remaining pixies. Ron was furious at the professor's incompetence, but Hermione attempted to defend him, suggesting it was for their own hands-on experience, a claim that Ron and Harry found utterly ridiculous. Chapter 7: Mudbloods and Murmurs. The chapter begins by detailing Harry's ongoing efforts to avoid the insufferable Gilderoy Lockhart, a task made more difficult by the persistent presence of his first-year admirer, Colin Creevey. Colin appears to have memorized Harry's schedule, finding immense joy in greeting him multiple times a day. Adding to Harry's frustrations are Hedwig's lingering anger from their journey to school and Ron's continuously malfunctioning wand, which backfires spectacularly in Charms class, striking Professor Flitwick and causing a large green boil to erupt on his forehead. Consequently, Harry is greatly relieved when the weekend arrives. Their plans to visit Hagrid are interrupted when Oliver Wood, the zealous captain of the Gryffindor Quidditch team, wakes Harry at the crack of dawn for a surprise practice session. Wood, brimming with a manic energy, explains it is part of a new, intensive training program designed to secure the Quidditch Cup. On his way to the pitch, Harry is intercepted by Colin Creevey, who excitedly shows him a developed, moving photograph of Lockhart trying to drag Harry into the frame. When Colin asks for an autograph, Harry flatly refuses and tries to hurry away, but the younger boy follows him, chattering excitedly and asking a barrage of questions about the rules of Quidditch. Resigned, Harry explains the functions of the bludgers, the quaffle, and the golden snitch, along with the roles of the various players. In the changing rooms, the rest of the Gryffindor team is exhausted and barely awake. Wood launches into an incredibly long and tedious explanation of his new strategies, using a series of complex diagrams. The team is thoroughly bored, with Fred Weasley falling asleep entirely. After what feels like an eternity, they finally head out to the pitch, only to find the entire Slytherin Quidditch team, clad in green robes, already there. An outraged Wood confronts their captain, Marcus Flint, insisting he had booked the pitch. Flint, however, produces a note signed by Professor Snape, granting the Slytherin team permission to practice in order to train their new Seeker. This new Seeker is revealed to be none other than Draco Malfoy. The Slytherins then unveil their new team brooms, 7 state-of-the-art Nimbus 2001s, a lavish gift from Lucius Malfoy, which they use to mock the Gryffindor's older models. When Hermione retorts that no one on the Gryffindor team had to buy their way in, relying on talent instead, Malfoy's smug expression falters and he spits a venomous insult at her, calling her a filthy little mudblood. The term causes an immediate uproar. As Fred and George lunge at Malfoy, Ron draws his broken wand to curse him. However, the spell backfires, shooting out of the wrong end of the wand and hitting Ron in the stomach. He is thrown backwards and begins to vomit a cascade of large, glistening slugs. While the Slytherins are paralyzed with cruel laughter, Harry and Hermione help the miserable Ron toward Hagrid's hut for assistance. After hiding from a departing Gilderoy Lockhart, who had been offering Hagrid unsolicited advice, they enter the cabin. Hagrid, unperturbed by Ron's condition, provides a basin and explains that Lockhart was the only person who applied for the Defense Against the Dark Arts job, suggesting the position is jinxed. When he learns what Malfoy called Hermione, Hagrid is furious. Ron, between bouts of slug vomiting, explains that mudblood is a deeply offensive slur for a muggle-born wizard, used by pure-blood supremacist families like the Malfoys, who consider them to have dirty blood. Hagrid reassures Hermione, praising her magical talent. Before they leave, he shows them his magically enlarged pumpkins being grown for the Halloween feast. Upon returning to the castle, Harry and Ron are assigned detention by Professor McGonagall. Ron must polish silver in the trophy room with Argus Filch without using magic, while Harry is tasked with answering Gilderoy Lockhart's fan mail. That evening, in Lockhart's candlelit office, surrounded by countless moving photographs of the vain professor, Harry endures hours of tedious envelope addressing, while Lockhart drones on about fame. Suddenly, Harry hears a disembodied, chilling voice whispering threats to rip, tear, and kill. He jumps in alarm, but Lockhart hears nothing and dismisses Harry's concern as drowsiness. Later, Harry recounts the terrifying experience to Ron, who is just as baffled, leaving Harry alone with the unnerving mystery of the voice only he could hear. Chapter 8. The Death Day Party. The arrival of October brought a pervasive damp chill to the castle and its grounds, leading to a surge of colds that kept Madame Pomfrey occupied. Her pepper-up potion, while effective, left drinkers smoking at the ears, a peculiar side effect that Percy forced upon a peaky-looking Ginny Weasley, making her fiery hair seem genuinely aflame. Amidst relentless bullet-sized rain and swelling pumpkins, the Gryffindor Quidditch team's morale was low. A scouting report from Fred and George confirmed their fears about the Slytherin team's new Nimbus 2001s, describing them as 7 blurs of green moving with incredible speed. Returning from one such dismal practice, drenched and muddy, Harry encountered a morose, nearly headless Nick, the Gryffindor ghost. Nick was lamenting his rejection from the Headless Hunt, a society of fully decapitated ghosts. He bitterly shared the rejection letter from Sir Patrick Delaney Podmore, which explained that since a half-inch of skin and sinew still connected his neck, he was ineligible for activities like head polo, a source of great pain and ridicule for him. Their conversation was interrupted by the appearance of Mrs. Norris, the caretaker's skeletal cat, followed swiftly by Argus Filch himself, who was in a foul temper due to the flu and an incident involving third years and frog brains. Enraged by Harry's muddy tracks, Filch dragged him to his dingy, windowless office, a room filled with filing cabinets detailing student punishments and a polished collection of chains. As Filch prepared to write Harry up for befouling the castle, a loud crash from overhead signaled the work of Peeves the poltergeist. Filch, in a fit of rage, abandoned Harry to deal with the new chaos. Left alone, Harry noticed a glossy purple envelope on the desk for a correspondence course called Quickspill, designed for beginners in magic. Reading the materials, which offered help for those with woeful wand work, Harry realized the profound implication. Filch, the magic-hating caretaker, was likely a squib, a non-magical person from a wizarding family, desperate to learn. When Filch returned, he saw the disturbed envelope and, in a panic to protect his secret, dismissed a bewildered Harry without punishment. Outside, Harry learned from a grateful, nearly headless Nick that he had orchestrated the diversion with Peeves. Wanting to return the favour, Harry listened as Nick hesitantly invited him, Ron, and Hermione to his 500th Death Day party on Halloween, also asking if Harry might mention how frightening he was to Sir Patrick. On Halloween night, the trio forewent the Great Hall's festive feast and descended into the dungeons for the party. The atmosphere was profoundly grim, with freezing temperatures, black candles casting a ghostly blue light, and an orchestra of 30 ghosts playing musical saws. The dungeon was filled with hundreds of translucent ghosts, and the banquet table was laden with rotten fish, burnt cakes, and a maggoty haggis, all designed to give the strongest possible flavour for beings who could barely taste. They had a brief, awkward encounter with Moaning Myrtle, the ghost who haunts a girl's toilet, before Peeves taunted her into a tearful retreat. The party's low point came with the grand entrance of the Headless Hunt, who galloped in on spectral horses. Their leader, Sir Patrick, openly mocked Nick's nearly headless status, and ruined his commemorative speech by starting a game of head hockey, leaving Nick utterly humiliated. Cold and hungry, the trio decided to leave. As they ascended from the dungeons, Harry heard a cold, murderous voice that no one else could perceive, whispering of killing and blood. He frantically followed the sound up through the castle, with Ron and Hermione struggling to keep up until it faded on the second floor. There, they discovered a terrifying scene. Daubed in shimmering letters on the wall between two windows was the message, "The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware." Hanging by her tail from a torch bracket below the words was Mrs. Norris, stiff as a board and seemingly dead. Just as they took in the horror, the school feast ended, and hundreds of students flooded the corridor, falling silent at the grisly sight. Harry, Ron, and Hermione were left standing alone at the scene, when Draco Malfoy pushed through the crowd, a grin on his face, and shouted, "You'll be next, mudbloods!" Chapter 9. The Writing on the Wall. The chapter commences in a chaotic hallway where Draco Malfoy's shout has drawn the attention of the school's caretaker, Argus Filch. He arrives to find a horrifying scene. His beloved cat, Mrs. Norris, hanging stiffly from a torch bracket, seemingly dead. Consumed by grief and rage, Filch immediately directs his accusations at Harry Potter, who is standing nearby. His threats to kill Harry are interrupted by the timely arrival of Headmaster Albus Dumbledore, accompanied by Professors McGonagall and Snape, and the ever-eager Gilderoy Lockhart. Dumbledore calmly takes charge, detaching the cat and summoning Filch, Harry, Ron, and Hermione to Lockhart's office for an inquiry. Inside the narcissistic professor's study, filled with portraits of himself, Dumbledore begins a meticulous examination of Mrs. Norris. While Lockhart offers useless, self-aggrandizing theories about advanced dark curses, Snape observes the proceedings with a peculiar, almost smiling expression, creating a palpable sense of foreboding for Harry. Filch, sobbing uncontrollably, escalates his accusations, revealing in his distress that Harry knows he is a squib, a non-magical person born to a wizarding family, a fact he had hoped to conceal. Dumbledore, however, dismisses the notion that a second-year student could perform such advanced magic. Snape seizes the opportunity to cast suspicion on the trio, questioning why they were not at the Halloween feast. Their explanation of nearly headless Nick's Death Day party is met with Snape's cynical disbelief, who then attempts to have Harry suspended from the Quidditch team. Professor McGonagall defends Harry, and Dumbledore ultimately declares him innocent until proven guilty, infuriating both Snape and Filch. Dumbledore reassures the caretaker that Mrs. Norris is not dead, but has been petrified, and that a cure can be made from mandrakes once they mature. Following their dismissal, the trio retreats to an empty classroom to process the night's events and the cryptic message found on the wall. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware. Harry questions whether he should have mentioned the disembodied voice only he could hear, but Ron advises against it, noting that hearing voices is generally considered a dark omen in the wizarding world. Ron then provides an explanation of the Chamber of Secrets, recalling a legend about a hidden chamber built by Salazar Slytherin, one of Hogwarts' founders. The aftermath of the attack grips the school. Filch patrols the corridor with renewed bitterness. Ginny Weasley is deeply upset, and Hermione immerses herself in library research. The incident also causes other students, like Justin Finch-Fletchley, to fear and avoid Harry. The mystery of the chamber is finally unravelled in their dreary history of magic class. In an unprecedented move, Hermione interrupts the ghostly Professor Binns to ask about the legend. Annoyed but compelled by the entire class's sudden attentiveness, Binns recounts the story of Hogwarts' founding. He explains that Salazar Slytherin wished to admit only pure-blood students, and after a falling out with the other founders, left the school. According to the legend, however, he first built a secret chamber containing a monster that only his true heir could unleash to purge the school of those Slytherin deemed unworthy, specifically Muggle-borns. After the lesson, the trio returns to the scene of the attack to investigate. Harry's private anxiety grows as he recalls the Sorting Hat's initial desire to place him in Slytherin. At the corridor, they discover peculiar evidence. A large group of spiders fleeing the castle through a tiny crack in a window, a behaviour that unnerves Ron, who reveals a deep-seated fear of them. They trace the water they had seen on the floor to the out-of-order girls' bathroom, the haunting ground of Moaning Myrtle. Their attempt to question the ghost proves futile, as she is too absorbed in her own spectral misery to provide any useful information. Their investigation is cut short by Percy Weasley, who is appalled to find them emerging from a girl's bathroom and, in a display of officious authority, deducts points from Gryffindor. Later that evening in the common room, the conversation turns to the identity of Slytherin's heir. Ron and Harry are convinced it must be Draco Malfoy, given his family's pure-blood supremacy and his public animosity towards Muggleborns. Hermione, while sceptical, devises a daring and dangerous plan to confirm their suspicions. She proposes they use Polyjuice Potion, a complex potion that allows the drinker to assume the physical appearance of another person. Their plan is to disguise themselves as Slytherin students and question Malfoy directly, but she acknowledges that obtaining the recipe from the restricted section of the library will be their first and perhaps most difficult challenge. Chapter 10. The Rogue Bludger. The chapter commences in Professor Lockhart's defense against the dark arts classroom, where his teaching methods have devolved from chaotic practical lessons to self-aggrandizing performances. Following a disastrous encounter with Cornish pixies, Lockhart now opts to read passages from his own books and stage dramatic reenactments of his supposed triumphs. Harry finds himself repeatedly chosen as an unwilling participant, having been forced to portray a variety of characters, including a Transylvanian villager, a yeti, and a lettuce-eating vampire. In this particular lesson, he is cast as a werewolf, compelled to howl pathetically, while Lockhart theatrically demonstrates his mastery of the amorphous charm. Once the bell signals the end of class, Harry, Ron, and Hermione put their plan into motion. Hermione nervously approaches Lockhart, clutching a permission slip, and requests his signature to check a book out of the library's restricted section. She cleverly frames the request by linking it to his book, Gadding with Ghouls, a tactic that immediately appeals to Lockhart's immense vanity. So flattered is he by Hermione's feigned admiration for his work, particularly her mention of a trivial detail involving a tea strainer, that he signs the note with a flamboyant flourish from a massive peacock quill without even glancing at the book's title. His egotism is further displayed when he offers Harry private Quidditch coaching, condescendingly suggesting he can pass on his expertise to less able players. With the signature secured, the trio heads to the library. After a brief struggle with the stern librarian, Madame Pince, who eyes the note with deep suspicion, they obtain their prize, a large, mouldy-looking volume titled Moste Potente Potions. They retreat to the disused bathroom haunted by Moaning Myrtle, a location they choose for its guaranteed privacy. Inside, they discover why the book is restricted. It contains instructions for gruesome concoctions, complete with disturbing illustrations. They locate the recipe for the Polyjuice Potion, a brew of incredible complexity that allows the drinker to assume the physical form of another person. The list of ingredients includes relatively simple items like lacewing flies and fluxweed, but also far more challenging components, such as powdered horn of a bicorn and shredded skin of a boomslang. The final ingredient, however, is the most unsettling, a piece of the person they wish to impersonate. Ron is disgusted by the idea of ingesting anything from crab or Goyle, while Harry expresses concern about having to steal ingredients from Professor Snape's private stores. Hermione, in a moment of uncharacteristic defiance, passionately argues that breaking school rules is a minor offence compared to the threat posed by the heir of Slytherin to Muggleborn students. Her conviction sways the boys, and they commit to the plan, despite learning that the potion will take an entire month to brew. The narrative then shifts to the first Quidditch match of the season between Gryffindor and Slytherin. The tension is high, exacerbated by the fact that the Slytherin team is now equipped with superior Nimbus 2001 brooms. Oliver Wood delivers a passionate pre-match speech, urging his team to overcome this disadvantage with superior skill and determination, telling Harry to catch the snitch or die trying. The match begins, and almost immediately, a bludger behaves erratically, singling out Harry with relentless and violent focus. It ignores all other players and swerves with unnatural precision to attack him again and again. Fred and George Weasley are forced to abandon their offensive duties as beaters to fly defensively on either side of Harry, trying to fend off the bewitched ball. During a timeout, they insist to Wood that the bludger has been tampered with. Realizing he has no chance of spotting the snitch while flanked by his protectors, Harry makes a risky decision. He convinces Wood to order the twins to leave him alone, opting to face the rogue bludger by himself. When play resumes, Harry uses his agility to evade the rogue bludger, performing a series of daring aerial maneuvers that draw laughter from the crowd. While taunting Malfoy, he spots the golden snitch hovering just above Malfoy's left ear. As Harry hesitates for a split second, the bludger finally connects, shattering his elbow. In a haze of searing pain, Harry manages to dive, knock Malfoy aside, and seize the snitch with his good hand, securing victory for Gryffindor just before he falls from his broom and faints. He awakens on the muddy field to find Professor Lockhart beaming over him, insisting he can mend the broken arm with a simple charm. Despite Harry's protests, Lockhart performs the spell, but instead of fixing the bones, he removes them entirely, leaving Harry's arm boneless and rubbery. In the hospital wing, a furious Madame Pomfrey begins the painful overnight process of regrowing the 33 bones using a foul-tasting potion called Skeeler Grow. Later that night, as Harry lies in the dark, he is visited by Dobby the house elf. In a series of shocking confessions, Dobby admits that he was the one who sealed the magical barrier at the train station and bewitched the bludger. His intentions, he tearfully explains, were not to kill Harry, but to injure him badly enough to be sent home. Dobby reveals that he is trying to protect Harry because history is to repeat itself, and the Chamber of Secrets has been opened once more. Before he can reveal who is responsible, he hears footsteps approaching and vanishes with a crack. Dumbledore and Professor McGonagall then enter the hospital wing, carrying a petrified body which they lay on a nearby bed. Harry, feigning sleep, sees that the victim is the first-year student Colin Creevey, found frozen with his camera held up to his face. When Dumbledore opens the camera, it releases a jet of steam, its insides completely melted. Dumbledore gravely confirms that the Chamber of Secrets is indeed open again, and concludes the chapter by stating that the true question is not who has opened it, but how. Chapter 11. The Dueling Club. Harry awoke on Sunday morning to find that his arm had been fully reboned, leaving it very stiff but functional. After a quick checkup and a left-handed breakfast provided by Madame Pomfrey, he was discharged from the hospital wing. He hurried to Gryffindor Tower, eager to share the news about Dobby and the petrified Colin Creevey with Ron and Hermione, but they were nowhere to be found. Feeling a bit slighted, Harry began searching for them. He ran into Percy Weasley, who was in an unusually cheerful mood, and congratulated Harry on earning 50 points for Gryffindor's House Cup lead with his Quidditch performance. When asked, Percy confirmed he had not seen Ron or Hermione, making a pointed remark about hoping Ron was not in another girl's lavatory. This comment, however, gave Harry an idea, and he immediately headed for Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. Inside, he heard his friends' voices coming from a locked cubicle. After identifying himself, he was let in to find them brewing the Polyjuice potion in a cauldron perched over a magical, portable fire on the toilet. Ron and Hermione explained that they had already heard about Colin Creevey's attack from the teachers and had decided to waste no time in starting the potion. Their theory, solidified by this new attack, was that Draco Malfoy was the heir of Slytherin and had taken out his post-Quidditch frustrations on Colin. Harry then revealed the details of his late-night visitation from Dobby the house elf. Ron and Hermione were stunned to learn that the Chamber of Secrets had been opened in the past. This information led them to a powerful conclusion. Lucius Malfoy must have opened the chamber during his time at Hogwarts, and has now passed the knowledge down to his son. They lamented that Dobby had not specified what kind of monster resided within the chamber, leading to speculation about its nature, with Hermione suggesting it could be a creature capable of disguise, like a chameleon ghoul. By Monday, the news of Colin's fate had created a palpable atmosphere of fear throughout the school. First-year students began travelling in nervous clusters, and Ginny Weasley, who sat next to Colin in class, was particularly distraught. Fred and George's attempts to cheer her up by comically pretending to be monsters only ended when an enraged Percy threatened to inform their mother about Ginny's ensuing nightmares. A thriving black market for protective charms and amulets sprang up among the students. Neville Longbottom, despite being a pureblood, was especially fearful, arguing that since Argus Filch, a squib, was attacked first, his own status as almost a squib put him in danger. As December progressed, Harry, Ron, and Hermione committed to staying at Hogwarts for the Christmas holiday, knowing Malfoy was also remaining behind, which they viewed as the perfect opportunity to use the Polyjuice potion. The potion, however, was incomplete, still requiring bicorn horn and boomslang skin, ingredients that could only be acquired by stealing from Professor Snape's private stores. Hermione, citing her clean disciplinary record, devised a plan wherein she would perform the theft, while Harry and Ron created a significant diversion during their next double potions lesson. During the class, as Snape prowled the dungeon classroom making his usual disparaging remarks, Harry waited for Hermione's signal. On her nod, he lobbed one of Fred Weasley's filibuster fireworks directly into Goyle's cauldron. The resulting explosion sprayed the class with swelling solution, causing chaos as students' body parts began to inflate grotesquely. Amid the pandemonium, Hermione slipped out unnoticed, returning minutes later with the stolen ingredients bulging in her robes. Snape, after administering the antidote, discovered the fireworks' remains, and though he fixed Harry with a deeply suspicious glare, could not prove his involvement. A week later, a notice appeared, announcing the formation of a dueling club, with its first meeting that evening. The trio, seeing the potential value in learning defensive magic, decided to attend. In the Great Hall, the dining tables were gone, replaced by a golden stage under the enchanted black ceiling. The instructor was revealed to be Gilderoy Lockhart, who grandly introduced his assistant, a sneering Severus Snape. For a demonstration, the two professors faced off. Lockhart, full of pompous flourishes, prepared for a mock duel, while Snape simply cast a single, powerful disarming charm, Expelliarmus, which blasted Lockhart off his feet and sent him sprawling against the far wall. Though humiliated, Lockhart attempted to save face by claiming he had intentionally allowed Snape to demonstrate the charm. Lockhart then instructed the students to pair up for practice. Snape, with malicious glee, separated Harry, Ron, and Hermione, partnering Harry with Draco Malfoy. Their duel began before the official count, with Malfoy hitting Harry with a spell that felt like being struck with a saucepan. Harry retaliated with a tickling charm, Rictus Sempra, which sent Malfoy to his knees in uncontrollable laughter. Malfoy, gasping, managed to cast Tarrant Allegra, forcing Harry's legs into a frantic, uncontrollable dance. Snape was forced to intervene with a counter-curse, seeing the general chaos, which included Hermione being trapped in a headlock by Millicent Bulstrode. Lockhart decided to demonstrate how to block spells. Snape mockingly suggested Harry and Malfoy as the volunteer pair. As they took their positions, Snape whispered something to Malfoy. On Lockhart's signal, Malfoy shouted, "Serpensortia!" and a long black snake erupted from his wand. Lockhart's attempt to vanish the serpent only resulted in blasting it high into the air, making it angrier. The enraged snake slithered directly toward a terrified Justin Finch Fletchley. Acting on pure instinct, Harry shouted at the snake to leave Justin alone. To everyone's shock, the snake immediately became docile and turned its attention to Harry. The crowd, however, did not react with relief but with terror and suspicion. Justin, looking both angry and frightened, stormed out of the hall. Ron and Hermione quickly dragged a bewildered Harry away to the Gryffindor common room. There they explained the horrifying truth. Harry had spoken Parseltongue, the language of snakes. This was not a common ability. It was the very gift that Salazar Slytherin was famous for, and the reason the symbol of Slytherin House is a serpent. The implication was clear and devastating. The entire school would now believe Harry was Slytherin's descendant, and by extension, the heir who had opened the chamber. That night, Harry lay awake, tormented by the memory of the Sorting Hat insisting he belonged in Slytherin. The following day, a blizzard cancelled their herbology lesson, preventing Harry from explaining himself to Justin. Seeking him out, Harry went to the library and overheard a group of Hufflepuffs, led by Ernie Macmillan, discussing the incident. They were convinced Harry was the heir, citing his ability to speak Parseltongue as the mark of a dark wizard and twisting past events, like the attacks on Mrs. Norris and Colin Creevey, into a pattern of Harry targeting those who annoyed him. When Harry confronted them, they refused to listen to his explanation. Furious and disheartened, Harry stormed through the corridors, briefly encountering Hagrid, who was carrying a dead rooster. The second one killed that term. Continuing on his way through a darkened passageway, Harry tripped over something on the floor. He looked down to see the rigid, petrified bodies of Justin Finch-Fletchley and the ghost, nearly headless Nick. As he stood in shock, Peeves the poltergeist appeared, and upon seeing the scene began screaming, "Attack! Attack! Another attack!" His cries brought students and teachers flooding into the corridor. Ernie Macmillan arrived and dramatically accused Harry of being caught in the act. Professor McGonagall restored order and, after sending Justin to the hospital wing and having Ernie waft the immobilized ghost upstairs, she informed Harry that the matter was now out of her hands. She led him to a large stone gargoyle, spoke the password "Sherbet Lemon," and stepped with him onto a moving spiral staircase that ascended towards Albus Dumbledore's office. Chapter 12. The Polyjuice Potion. The chapter begins with Harry being escorted by Professor McGonagall to the headmaster's office. Left alone to wait, Harry takes in the magnificent and peculiar circular room, which is filled with curious silver instruments and portraits of previous headmasters and headmistresses. Feeling a surge of anxiety about his place at Hogwarts, he impulsively tries on the Sorting Hat. The hat speaks to him, acknowledging his internal conflict and reiterating its original assessment that he would have found greatness in Slytherin, a statement that deeply unsettles Harry. Just after he puts the hat back, he is startled by a decrepit-looking bird that suddenly bursts into flames, leaving only a pile of ashes. Dumbledore enters at that moment and, seeing Harry's panic, calmly explains that the bird, Fawkes, is a phoenix and has just experienced his burning day, a natural process of death and rebirth. Before Dumbledore can properly question Harry, Hagrid bursts in, passionately defending Harry's innocence regarding the recent attacks. Dumbledore assures Hagrid that he does not suspect Harry and dismisses him. The headmaster then gently asks Harry if there is anything he wishes to confess, but Harry, thinking of the disembodied voice only he can hear and the secret potion brewing in the bathroom, chooses to remain silent. The attack on Justin and nearly headless Nick has thrown the school into a state of panic, prompting many students to return home for the Christmas holiday. Harry finds the relative quiet peaceful, though he is tired of the suspicion and fear from his fellow students. Fred and George Weasley, however, find the situation amusing and loudly proclaim Harry as the heir of Slytherin in the corridors, much to Percy's disapproval and Draco Malfoy's increasing irritation. With the castle mostly empty, Hermione announces that the Polyjuice potion is finally ready. On Christmas morning, she finalizes the plan. She, Harry, and Ron will use the potion that evening to transform into Slytherin students to interrogate Malfoy. Her strategy involves luring Crabbe and Goyle with chocolate cakes laced with a simple sleeping draught. Once they are unconscious, Harry and Ron are to steal some of their hair for the potion. Hermione reveals she has already procured a hair from Millicent Bulstrode during their duel. Later that day, the initial phase of their plan succeeds perfectly. Harry and Ron leave the drugged cakes where Crabbe and Goyle will find them, and the two greedy Slytherins quickly devour them and fall unconscious. After hiding their bodies in a broom cupboard and collecting hair samples, Harry and Ron join Hermione in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. They add the hairs to their individual glasses of the foul, bubbling potion. Harry's transformation into Goyle is a grotesque and painful experience, feeling as though his entire body is melting and reforming. When it is over, he and Ron, who is now a perfect double for Crabbe, stare at each other in disbelief. However, Hermione refuses to come out of her locked cubicle, insisting they go on without her. Pressed for time, the two boys leave, setting off to find the Slytherin common room. Disguised as Crabbe and Goyle, they are eventually found by Draco Malfoy himself, who leads them into the dungeons. Inside the long, low-ceilinged common room, Malfoy reveals that he is not the heir and expresses frustration that he does not know who is, wishing he could assist them. He shares critical information, telling them that the last time the Chamber of Secrets was opened, 50 years prior, a mudblood died, and he venomously hopes Hermione is next. He also mentions that his father, Lucius Malfoy, has a secret chamber of dark arts items hidden beneath their drawing room floor. Just as Ron's fury at Malfoy's insults threatens to expose them, the 1-hour time limit on the potion expires. They begin to transform back into themselves and make a frantic escape. They race back to Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, where they learn the reason for Hermione's absence. She emerges from the stall sobbing, her face covered in black fur, with yellow cat eyes and pointed ears. The hair she took from Millicent Bulstrode's robes had actually belonged to her cat, and the polyjuice potion is not meant for animal transformations. The chapter concludes as Harry and Ron decide they must take her to the hospital wing. Chapter 13. The Very Secret Diary. Hermione Granger's recovery in the hospital wing stretched on for a number of weeks following the Christmas holidays. Her unfortunate transformation into a cat-human hybrid became the subject of widespread rumour, with most students incorrectly assuming she had been another victim of the heir of Slytherin. The constant stream of curious onlookers attempting to see her furry face prompted Madame Pomfrey to once again enclose her bed with privacy curtains. Harry and Ron were diligent in their visits, bringing her homework each evening. Ron expressed his belief that sprouting whiskers was a perfectly valid reason to take a break from studies, but Hermione, with her spirit improving as the hair vanished and her eyes returned to their normal brown, insisted on keeping up. She quietly asked for any new leads on the attacks, to which Harry could only offer a gloomy negative. During one such visit, Ron, ever disdainful of Gilderoy Lockhart, discovered a get-well card from the vain professor under Hermione's pillow, which he mockingly read aloud, much to her embarrassment. Later, as Harry and Ron made their way back to Gryffindor Tower, complaining about the mountain of homework assigned by Snape, they overheard the hysterical shouting of Argus Filch. They found him enraged on the very spot where his cat had been petrified. The corridor was flooded with a great deal of water, which appeared to be seeping from under the door of Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. Inside, they discovered the ghost crying more intensely than ever. Myrtle explained that her misery was caused by someone throwing a book at her, which had passed right through her head while she was contemplating death in her usual toilet U-bend. Underneath a sink, Harry and Ron found the object, a small, soggy, black-covered book. Ron, wary of enchanted items, warned Harry that it could be dangerous, recounting tales from his father at the Ministry of Magic about books that burned out eyes or forced people to speak only in limericks. Harry, however, dismissed the concern and picked it up, discovering it was a diary from 50 years ago. The first page bore the smudged name T.M. Riddle. Ron recognized the name immediately, recalling that he had been forced to polish a shield belonging to Riddle for special services to the school 50 years prior during a detention. The diary's pages, however, were entirely blank, leading Harry to wonder why someone would want to flush it away. When Hermione was finally discharged from the hospital wing in early February, looking fully human again, Harry showed her the diary. Her excitement was palpable as she immediately theorized a connection. She pointed out that the diary was 50 years old, the same length of time since the Chamber of Secrets was last opened. Hermione brilliantly deduced that perhaps T.M. Riddle had received his special award for catching the previous heir of Slytherin. She posited that the diary could hold all the secrets to the chamber, which would explain why the current culprit would want it destroyed. Despite her enthusiasm, her attempts to reveal any hidden writing using the spell Apparicium and a magical revealer were unsuccessful. Despite the diary's blankness, Harry felt an inexplicable connection to it and to the name T.M. Riddle. He led his friends to the trophy room, where they confirmed Riddle had also been a prefect and head boy, prompting Ron to compare him unfavourably to his own brother Percy. Meanwhile, the general mood at Hogwarts had begun to lift, as no further attacks had occurred. Gilderoy Lockhart took full credit for this, boasting that his presence had intimidated the culprit into stopping. His idea of a morale booster was revealed on February the 14th to be a garish Valentine's Day celebration, complete with lurid pink decorations and a dozen surly dwarfs dressed as cupids, tasked with delivering singing valentines. The day culminated in a deeply embarrassing moment for Harry when a particularly grim-looking dwarf cornered him to deliver a musical message. In the chaotic struggle that followed, Harry's bag ripped open, spilling its contents everywhere. Draco Malfoy seized the opportunity to snatch Riddle's diary. Enraged, Harry used the disarming charm, sending the diary flying into Ron's waiting hands. Malfoy then cruelly revealed that Ginny Weasley had sent the valentine, causing her to flee in humiliation. Later, Harry noticed something extraordinary. While all his other books were soaked in spilled red ink, the diary was perfectly clean. That night, alone in his dormitory, Harry experimented by writing in the diary. The ink was absorbed into the page without a trace. Then, to his astonishment, new words written in his own ink appeared, forming a response. A silent conversation began between Harry and the diary's author, Tom Riddle. Riddle explained that the diary contained his memories of terrible events at Hogwarts, specifically about the Chamber of Secrets. He claimed to have caught the person who opened the chamber 50 years ago, which resulted in a student's death. When Harry asked who it was, Riddle offered not just to tell him, but to show him. Upon Harry's agreement, the pages of the diary began to whirl, and he was pulled headfirst into an entry dated June the 13th. Harry found himself an invisible spectator in the headmaster's office of 50 years past, witnessing a 16-year-old Tom Riddle speaking with headmaster Armando Dippet. Riddle, an orphan, pleaded to be allowed to stay at Hogwarts over the summer, but Dippet refused, citing the danger posed by the attacks and the recent death of a girl. Riddle then encountered a much younger Albus Dumbledore before heading to the dungeons. There, he waited in the shadows until he could confront a huge boy named Rubeus. Riddle accused Rubeus of raising the monster that had killed the student. He used his wand to force open a large box, from which a vast, hairy spider with many eyes emerged and fled. Rubeus, in a desperate attempt to protect his creature, tackled Riddle, and the scene dissolved. Harry was thrown violently back onto his bed. When Ron entered the room, a shaken Harry delivered the shocking conclusion he had drawn from the memory. It was Hagrid who had opened the Chamber of Secrets 50 years ago. Chapter 14, Cornelius Fudge. The chapter commences with Harry, Ron, and Hermione grappling with the deeply unsettling information they discovered within Tom Riddle's diary. Harry finds himself in a state of internal conflict, reflecting on Hagrid's well-known and unfortunate affection for monstrous creatures. He can easily picture a 13-year-old Hagrid being fascinated by the chamber's monster and perhaps even attempting to befriend it. But he remains steadfast in his belief that Hagrid would never have intended to kill anybody. The three friends engage in long, circular conversations, dissecting the facts. Hermione cautiously proposes that Riddle might have identified the wrong individual, but the damning evidence remains that the attacks 50 years ago ceased immediately after Hagrid's expulsion from the school. Ultimately, they decide not to confront Hagrid with these accusations unless another attack were to occur, clinging to the hope that the threat had retired for good. For nearly 4 months, a tense but hopeful quiet settles over Hogwarts. Life begins to return to a semblance of normalcy. The mandrakes in the greenhouses mature, offering the promise of a cure for those who had been petrified. This peaceful interlude is occupied by the second-year students' task of selecting their subjects for the following year. This tranquility is violently shattered when Harry returns to the Gryffindor dormitory to discover that his trunk has been emptied and his belongings thrown everywhere. As he and his dorm mates assess the chaos, Harry realizes with a sinking feeling that Tom Riddle's diary is missing. Hermione logically concludes that the thief must be a fellow Gryffindor, as no one else would know the password to their common room. On the morning of the scheduled Quidditch match between Gryffindor and Hufflepuff, Harry is distracted and worried, scanning the faces of his housemates for any sign of guilt. As he, Ron and Hermione are walking through the castle, Harry hears the terrifying, disembodied voice once again, whispering its murderous intent. The sound triggers a sudden moment of profound understanding in Hermione, who exclaims that she thinks she has figured something out before sprinting away towards the library. Minutes later, just as the Quidditch match is set to begin, Professor McGonagall cancels the game and summons Harry. Ron joins him, and they are escorted to the hospital wing. There, they are confronted with a horrifying scene. There has been another double attack, and among the new victims is their best friend Hermione, lying utterly still and petrified next to a Ravenclaw prefect. Professor McGonagall tells them a small circular mirror was found on the floor beside them. In the aftermath, the school is placed under a state of lockdown with severe new rules. All students must return to their common rooms by 6 o'clock. They must be escorted to every lesson by a teacher, and all evening activities are cancelled. The threat of the school closing becomes terrifyingly real. Faced with the prospect of a permanent return to the Dursleys, Harry now fully comprehends the desperation that must have driven Tom Riddle to turn in Hagrid 50 years prior. Convinced that Hagrid holds the key to the Chamber of Secrets, even if he is not the one currently responsible, Harry and Ron resolve to visit him. That night, they use Harry's invisibility cloak to sneak out of the castle and down to his hut. They find Hagrid armed with a crossbow and in a state of extreme agitation. Their visit is almost immediately cut short by a knock at the door, forcing them to hide. Dumbledore enters, accompanied by Cornelius Fudge, the Minister of Magic. Fudge explains that due to mounting pressure, the Ministry must be seen to be taking action, and he has come to take Hagrid to the wizarding prison, Azkaban, as a precaution. The tense situation escalates with the arrival of Lucius Malfoy, who coldly presents an order of suspension for Dumbledore, signed by the 12 school governors, effectively removing the headmaster from his post. Before he is escorted from his own home, Hagrid manages to leave a cryptic clue for the hidden Harry and Ron, telling them that if they want to find answers, they should follow the spiders. The chapter concludes with Dumbledore suspended and Hagrid imprisoned, leaving the boys feeling completely abandoned and fearing for the inevitable doom of Hogwarts. Chapter 15. Aragog. The arrival of summer did little to lift the oppressive gloom that had settled over Hogwarts Castle. While the grounds blossomed with vibrant, oversized flowers under a periwinkle sky, the beauty felt hollow without the familiar sight of Hagrid and his dog, Fang. Fear had become the school's new, unwelcome resident following Dumbledore's suspension. Visits to the hospital wing were now forbidden, with Madame Pomfrey taking extreme precautions to protect the petrified students from a potential return of the attacker. The sunlight warming the castle's exterior walls seemed unable to penetrate the tense and worried atmosphere within, where laughter was a rare and quickly silenced sound. Harry Potter clung to Dumbledore's final words about loyalty and help being available to those who ask. But these sentiments felt abstract and useless in a school where everyone was paralyzed by fear. Hagrid's more tangible clue, to follow the spiders, proved difficult, as the castle seemed to have been mysteriously purged of all arachnids. The constant chaperoning of students by teachers further hampered Harry and Ron's investigation, a measure that most students welcomed, but Harry found deeply irritating. In stark contrast to the pervasive anxiety, Draco Malfoy revelled in the school's state of terror. During a potions lesson, Harry overheard him boasting to Crabbe and Goyle expressing his belief that his father was responsible for Dumbledore's removal and his hope that a new headmaster would not want the Chamber of Secrets closed. Malfoy even had the audacity to suggest that Professor Snape apply for the headmaster position, a suggestion Snape met with a poorly concealed, thin-lipped smile of satisfaction. Malfoy's cruelty peaked when he callously remarked that he wished Hermione Granger had been the next victim to die, a comment that sent Ron into a rage, requiring Harry and Dean to physically restrain him. Later, during a subdued herbology class, a remorseful Ernie Macmillan formally apologised to Harry for ever suspecting him, now theorising that Malfoy himself was the heir. It was at this moment that Harry spotted a line of spiders scurrying across the ground, heading directly for the Forbidden Forest. Their path was now clear. The decision was solidified in their next class, Defence Against the Dark Arts, where Gilderoy Lockhart's buoyant and infuriatingly ignorant pronouncements that the danger was over because Hagrid had been arrested only strengthened Harry and Ron's resolve to act that very night. After waiting past midnight for the Gryffindor common room to empty, Harry and Ron slipped out under the invisibility cloak. They retrieved a deliriously happy Fang from Hagrid's deserted cabin, silencing his booming barks with sticky treacle fudge, before venturing to the edge of the ominous woods. Guided by the tiny light from Harry's wand, they followed the trickle of spiders off the main path and deep into the tangled, dark heart of the forest. Their journey was abruptly halted by a strange rumbling and a sudden blinding blaze of light, which turned out to be Mr. Weasley's Ford Anglia, now seemingly feral and living wild within the woods. Their relief was short-lived, for just as they realised they had lost the spider trail, they were seized by enormous, hairy spiders and carried away into a vast, cleared hollow. There, they were confronted with a horrifying scene. A colony of spiders, the size of cart horses. They were brought before the colony's leader, an ancient blind acromantula named Aragog. Aragog initially commanded his children to kill the intruders, but he paused when Harry desperately explained they were friends of Hagrid, who was in trouble. The giant spider revealed that Hagrid had raised him from an egg in a castle cupboard 50 years ago. It was Aragog who had been mistaken for the monster from the Chamber of Secrets, a misunderstanding that led to Hagrid's expulsion. He confirmed his innocence, stating that the girl who died had been found in a bathroom, and he had never been anywhere in the castle besides his cupboard. Aragog spoke of the true monster as an ancient creature that spiders fear above all others, a beast so dreadful that they dare not speak its name. Having provided this information, Aragog declared that while his children would not harm Hagrid, he could not deny them fresh meat that had wandered so willingly into their nest. As the massive spiders closed in, the Ford Anglia roared to the rescue, crashing into the hollow with its horn blaring. The boys and Fang scrambled inside and were driven to safety by the sentient car. Back on the edge of the forest, a violently ill Ron cursed Hagrid's naive perception of monsters, but Harry realised they had finally proven Hagrid's innocence. Later, in their dormitory, the pieces clicked into place for Harry. Aragog had said the girl was found in a bathroom. He suddenly sat upright, realising that if she had died there, she might still be there as a ghost, leading him to the name of their next, and perhaps last, source of information. Moaning Myrtle. Chapter 16. The Chamber of Secrets. The narrative begins with Ron Weasley expressing profound frustration over their missed opportunity with Moaning Myrtle, lamenting that the ghost who witnessed an attack was physically located just a few stalls away from them during their previous visits to the bathroom. The challenge of now infiltrating a girl's restroom, especially the one adjacent to the original crime scene, seems nearly insurmountable. However, their focus is abruptly shifted during Transfiguration class by a startling announcement from Professor McGonagall. Their final exams are scheduled to begin in just 1 week. This news is met with widespread disbelief and outrage from the students, who cannot comprehend the logic of holding examinations amidst such a crisis. The tension is punctuated by Neville Longbottom accidentally vanishing a leg of his desk. McGonagall, however, remains firm, explaining that maintaining the school's educational routine is a directive from Dumbledore himself. This declaration leaves Harry Potter contemplating what he has even learned that would be useful, while Ron, burdened by his malfunctioning wand, views the prospect of exams with utter dread. A few days later, a glimmer of hope appears when Professor McGonagall shares what she terms good news. The Great Hall erupts with incorrect assumptions, from Dumbledore's return to the reinstatement of Quidditch. The actual news is that Professor Sprout's mandrakes have matured, meaning the petrified victims can finally be revived. The hope is that one of them can identify their attacker. Ron is particularly relieved, realizing that a conscious Hermione Granger will likely hold all the answers, though he humorously notes she will be furious about the impending exams. At this moment, a visibly tense Ginny Weasley approaches, attempting to confess something of great importance. Her nervous demeanor reminds Harry of Dobby the house elf on the verge of revealing forbidden information. Before she can speak, however, her brother Percy arrives, looking exhausted from patrol duty, and she flees in fright. Percy awkwardly dismisses the incident, claiming Ginny had caught him doing something private and was sworn to secrecy, an explanation that both Harry and Ron find unconvincing. Later, Harry and Ron seize an opportunity to ditch Gilderoy Lockhart's escort to class, intending to finally visit Myrtle. Their plan is foiled by the sudden appearance of Professor McGonagall. In a moment of quick thinking, Harry fabricates a story, claiming they were on their way to the hospital wing to see Hermione. To their astonishment, McGonagall's stern demeanor softens, and with a tear in her eye, she grants them permission, revealing a rare moment of vulnerability and empathy for the students most affected by the attacks. In the hospital wing, they find Hermione still frozen, but Harry notices a crumpled piece of paper clenched tightly in her fist. With great difficulty, he retrieves it. The page, torn from a library book, describes the basilisk, the king of serpents, detailing its lethal gaze, its mortal fear of a rooster's crow, and the fact that spiders flee from it. At the bottom, in Hermione's handwriting, is the single word, pipes. This discovery triggers a cascade of revelations. Harry realizes the monster is a basilisk, which explains why only he, a Parselmouth, could hear its voice. The pieces of the puzzle fall into place with stunning clarity. No one died because they all viewed the creature indirectly. Colin through his camera, Justin through nearly headless Nick, Mrs. Norris through a reflection in the flooded corridor, and Hermione and the Ravenclaw prefect through a mirror. The murder of Hagrid's roosters was a deliberate act to remove the basilisk's only fatal weakness. The creature has been navigating the castle through the plumbing, which perfectly aligns with the voice Harry heard within the walls, and Hermione's cryptic note. They deduce that the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets must be located in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. Before they can act on this information, a magically amplified voice of Professor McGonagall summons all students to their dormitories and teachers to the staff room. Hiding inside a wardrobe, Harry and Ron overhear the devastating news. A student has been taken into the chamber, and a new message declares that her skeleton will lie there forever. The student is Ginny Weasley. The teachers are thrown into despair, but their grim meeting is interrupted by a cheerful Lockhart. In a brilliantly orchestrated moment of retribution, Snape, McGonagall, and the other professors use Lockhart's own boasts against him, cornering him into taking on the heroic task of entering the chamber alone. Exposed as a coward, Lockhart retreats to his office to prepare. Devastated, Harry and Ron decide their only course of action is to tell Lockhart what they know. They find him in his office, frantically packing to flee Hogwarts. He confesses his entire career is a fraud built upon stealing the achievements of other wizards and then erasing their memories with his one true talent, memory charms. When he attempts to use a charm on them, Harry disarms him with the spell Snape had inadvertently taught him. They force the disgraced professor to Myrtle's bathroom, where they learn from the ghost that she died after seeing a pair of enormous yellow eyes near the sinks. Harry finds a tiny snake carved on a tap and, speaking in Parseltongue, commands it to open. The sink retracts, revealing a massive pipe. They force Lockhart down the slide-like entrance first, with Harry and Ron following into a dark, subterranean tunnel littered with animal skeletons. There they discover a massive shed snakeskin, confirming the monster's immense size. Lockhart seizes this moment to snatch Ron's broken wand, attempting to cast a memory charm. The faulty wand backfires with explosive force, triggering a rockfall that separates Harry from the others and completely erases Lockhart's own memory. Trapped on the other side with the amnesiac professor, Ron urges Harry to go on. Knowing time is critical for Ginny, Harry proceeds alone, past the terrifying snakeskin, until he reaches a solid wall carved with 2 emerald-eyed serpents. With his throat dry, he speaks Parseltongue one last time. The wall slides open, and shaking, Harry steps into the Chamber of Secrets itself. Chapter 17. The Heir of Slytherin. Upon entering the Chamber of Secrets, Harry Potter found himself in an immense, gloomily lit hall, defined by towering stone pillars carved with serpents. The cavernous space, filled with a strange greenish twilight and long dark shadows, was eerily silent, causing Harry's heart to pound with apprehension. He moved cautiously forward, wand at the ready, his every footstep echoing loudly as he scanned the darkness for any sign of the basilisk or the missing Ginny Weasley. As he neared the end of the chamber, an enormous statue of a wizard with a long, monkey-like face came into view, dominating the back wall. At the base of this imposing figure, between its giant stone feet, lay a small, black-robed form with fiery red hair. With a desperate cry, Harry sprinted to the figure, confirming his worst fears. It was Ginny, appearing as cold and white as marble. He frantically tried to wake her, but her head just lolled lifelessly, and a soft voice declared that she would not awaken. Harry spun around to see a tall, dark-haired boy with a strangely blurry outline leaning against a pillar. Harry recognized him as Tom Riddle, who explained he was not a ghost, but a memory, preserved within the diary for 50 years. Riddle revealed that Ginny was still alive, but barely, her life force draining away. When Harry pleaded for help, desperate to escape before the basilisk appeared, Riddle remained motionless, and Harry discovered his own wand was missing, now being twirled idly in Riddle's hand. Riddle calmly stated that the basilisk would only come when called, and that Harry would not be needing his wand, pocketing it with a chilling smile. He then began a horrifying confession, explaining that Ginny had poured her heart out into the diary, confiding all her fears and insecurities. This emotional outpouring served as nourishment for Riddle's memory, allowing him to grow stronger by feeding on her soul until he was powerful enough to impose his own will upon her. Riddle revealed that he had forced Ginny to open the chamber, strangle the school roosters, and unleash the serpent on the students, all while she was in a trance-like state, later having no memory of the events and believing she was going mad. When Ginny grew suspicious and tried to dispose of the diary, it fell into Harry's hands, which delighted Riddle, as his new target had become Harry himself. Riddle then admitted to framing Hagrid 50 years prior and explained his ultimate curiosity: how a mere baby with no special talent had managed to vanquish the most powerful wizard of all time. With a flourish of Harry's wand, he traced the letters of his full name, Tom Marvolo Riddle, in the air and rearranged them to spell out the terrifying truth: I am Lord Voldemort. As Harry grappled with this revelation, he defiantly proclaimed that Albus Dumbledore was the greatest wizard, which angered Riddle. At that moment, an ethereal music filled the chamber, and Fawkes, Dumbledore's phoenix, appeared in a burst of flame, dropping the ragged sorting hat at Harry's feet before landing on his shoulder. Riddle mocked these gifts, then turned to the statue and, in Parseltongue, commanded Slytherin's monster to emerge. From the statue's opening mouth, the colossal basilisk slithered forth, and Riddle ordered it to kill Harry. Running blindly with his eyes shut tight, Harry stumbled and fell. Just as the serpent closed in, Fawkes dove and heroically punctured the basilisk's great yellow eyes, blinding it. In its thrashing agony, the serpent swept the sorting hat into Harry's arms. Desperate, Harry put on the hat and mentally pleaded for help. In response, a heavy, hard object materialized within it, a magnificent, ruby-encrusted silver sword. Armed with the sword of Gryffindor, Harry faced the blinded but still deadly serpent. As the basilisk lunged one last time, Harry drove the sword to the hilt into the roof of its mouth. The beast collapsed, but not before one of its long, poisonous fangs pierced Harry's arm. As a searing, white-hot pain spread through his body, Harry knew he was dying. Riddle gloated over his imminent demise, but Fawkes landed beside Harry and wept thick, pearly tears onto the wound. The Phoenix tears, with their potent healing powers, neutralized the venom and closed the gash. As a stunned Riddle raised Harry's wand to attack again, Fawkes flew over and dropped the diary into Harry's lap. Without a moment's hesitation, Harry seized the broken basilisk fang from the floor and plunged it deep into the heart of the book. An inhuman scream tore through the chamber as torrents of ink gushed from the diary, and Riddle's form writhed, twisted, and then vanished completely. In the ensuing silence, Ginny stirred and awoke, sobbing with guilt and terror as she confessed her unwilling part in the events. Harry comforted her, showing her the destroyed diary, and they made their way back through the tunnel. They reunited with Ron, who had managed to clear a small passage through the rockfall. They also found Gilderoy Lockhart, whose backfired memory charm had left him with complete amnesia, cheerfully oblivious to their predicament. With all four of them, plus Ginny, Ron and Lockhart, clinging to Fawkes's tail feathers, the Phoenix effortlessly lifted them up the long pipe and back into Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. After a brief, awkward exchange with the ghost, Harry, led by the glowing Phoenix, guided the group towards Professor McGonagall's office to report the harrowing events that had transpired in the chamber below. Chapter 18. Dobby's Reward. The chapter begins in the immediate aftermath of the ordeal in the Chamber of Secrets, with a moment of stunned silence as Harry, Ron, Ginny, and a vacant Gilderoy Lockhart appear in the doorway of Dumbledore's office. They are all covered in filth and slime, with Harry additionally stained by blood. The silence is broken by a cry from Mrs. Weasley, who, along with her husband, rushes to embrace their rescued daughter in a display of profound parental relief. In the background, Professor Dumbledore stands beaming, while Professor McGonagall visibly struggles to compose herself from the shock. As Fawkes the Phoenix soars past to land on Dumbledore's shoulder, Harry and Ron are also enveloped in Mrs. Weasley's grateful hug. After placing the sorting hat, the ruby-adorned sword, and the punctured remains of Tom Riddle's diary on the desk, Harry begins to recount the entire sequence of events. He explains to the captivated audience how he had been hearing a disembodied voice, a mystery Hermione Granger ultimately solved by identifying the creature as a basilisk moving through the school's plumbing. He details his and Ron's journey into the Forbidden Forest, their encounter with Aragog, and the crucial piece of information the giant spider provided about the basilisk's last victim dying in a bathroom. This led Harry to deduce that Moaning Myrtle was the victim, and that the chamber's entrance was hidden in her lavatory. When pressed by Professor McGonagall on the specifics of their survival, Harry continues his tale, describing the timely arrival of Fawkes and how the sorting hat miraculously produced the Sword of Gryffindor. He falters, however, when it comes to explaining the diary's role and Ginny's involvement, fearing she will be expelled. Sensing Harry's predicament, Dumbledore masterfully intervenes, expressing his curiosity about how Lord Voldemort managed to enchant Ginny from his supposed hiding place in Albania. This statement brings a wave of relief over Harry and prompts a stunned Mr. Weasley to question the connection. Harry quickly presents the diary, explaining that it was written by a 16-year-old Tom Riddle. Dumbledore then reveals the shocking truth that very few people know. Tom Riddle was the name Lord Voldemort used as a student at Hogwarts 50 years prior. Ginny tearfully confesses to writing in the diary all year, and her father admonishes her for trusting an object that could think for itself. Dumbledore, however, shows immense compassion, stating there will be no punishment for Ginny, as even older and wiser wizards have been deceived by Voldemort. He sends her to the hospital wing for rest and hot chocolate, announcing that the mandrake juice is being distributed and the petrified students are waking. With the Weasleys gone, Dumbledore awards Harry and Ron with special awards for services to the school, along with 200 points each for Gryffindor, playfully retracting his earlier threat of expulsion. The attention then turns to Lockhart, who, due to a backfired memory charm, is utterly oblivious to his own identity. After Ron explains the accident, Dumbledore sends him with Lockhart to the hospital wing. Alone with Harry, Dumbledore provides a profound analysis of the events. He explains that Harry's unwavering loyalty to him was what summoned Fawkes. Harry, in turn, confides his deepest fear: his similarities to Voldemort, particularly his ability to speak Parseltongue and the Sorting Hat's initial consideration of placing him in Slytherin. Dumbledore calmly clarifies that when Voldemort attacked Harry as an infant, he unintentionally transferred some of his own powers, including the Slytherin ancestry's gift of Parseltongue, into Harry through the scar. Dumbledore then imparts a crucial lesson, asserting that it is our choices, far more than our innate abilities, that truly define who we are. To substantiate this, he presents the sword Harry wielded, pointing to the name engraved upon it, Godric Gryffindor. Dumbledore explains that only a true Gryffindor could have pulled that specific sword from the hat, offering Harry tangible proof of where he rightfully belongs. Their private discussion is violently interrupted by the arrival of Lucius Malfoy, furious that Dumbledore has been reinstated as headmaster. He is accompanied by his house elf, Dobby, who is covered in bandages. Dumbledore coolly informs Malfoy that the other 11 governors recalled him after hearing of the attack on Arthur Weasley's daughter, hinting that Malfoy had threatened their families to secure the initial suspension. Dumbledore then confronts Malfoy with the destroyed diary. As he does, Dobby frantically gestures from behind his master, pointing at the diary and then at Malfoy, making Harry understand the connection. Harry boldly accuses Malfoy of slipping the diary into Ginny's cauldron at Flourish and Blots. Though Malfoy demands proof, Dumbledore warns him that future distribution of Voldemort's old-school possessions will be traced back to him. As an enraged Malfoy departs, kicking Dobby out of the office ahead of him, Harry is struck by an ingenious idea. He asks Dumbledore for the diary, stuffs it inside his own filthy sock, and catches up to Malfoy. He hands the sock-covered diary to him, and Malfoy, disgusted, tears the sock off and discards it. Dobby catches the sock. According to the ancient rules of house elf servitude, if a master presents their elf with clothes, the elf is set free. Dobby is ecstatic. When Malfoy lunges at Harry in fury for losing his servant, Dobby powerfully repels him with magic, protecting Harry and ordering his former master to leave. Before disappearing with a crack, Dobby explains that his earlier clue about the Dark Lord was a hint that his former name, Tom Riddle, could be spoken freely. The chapter culminates in a joyous, all-night feast where everyone celebrates in their pajamas. Harry is greeted by a fully recovered Hermione, an apologetic Justin Finch-Fletchley, and a boisterous, newly returned Hagrid. Thanks to the 400 points awarded to Harry and Ron, Gryffindor wins the House Cup for the second consecutive year. Further good news arrives in the form of cancelled exams and the announcement of Lockhart's permanent departure, which is met with widespread cheering. The final pages describe the peaceful end of the term and the journey home on the Hogwarts Express. During the ride, Ginny reveals that Percy's secret is a girlfriend, the Ravenclaw prefect Penelope Clearwater. Harry gives Ron and Hermione his relative's telephone number, and the three friends walk back through the barrier into the Muggle world together.